Well, here we are, immediately upon the election day, and I want to just take a moment to remind you, pray for your country. And I think elections are vital. I thank God for America. I thank God for a country where we have elections. And some might say, well, our elections are crooked. Yeah, they're crooked all over the world. Maybe ours are a little better, maybe not. I don't know. But I know this God is my hope, and He's my strength, my refuge, my fortress, my high tower. But I would urge you to pray for your country. And if you haven't voted, vote. And somebody told me today, they said, I never got a ballot in the mail, their absentee ballot or whatever. My wife and I signed up for absentee ballots a long time ago, permanent absentee ballots, because we're busy and we travel, and sometimes we are not around, and otherwise we just fill them out and turn them in on the day on election day. Well, this year we mailed them in a week or so ahead. There's a risk of them disappearing, but there's a risk of something happening on election day. So whatever, but I want to encourage you to vote. Go down and show up. One time I didn't have any ballots given to me, and I had to go down, and I just walked into the polling place, said, hey, I don't have anything to vote with. I need to vote. And so they gave me, check my driver's license, what a concept, check my ID. And this is maybe, 8 years ago. And they gave me a provisional ballot, and I filled it out and turned it in. So you can just show up, but vote, vote, vote. Our country matters. Now, on top of that, God's in charge. You can trust Him. Don't fret. Don't stay home from voting for fear somebody will mug you on the way because you look conservative or whatever, or liberal. Conservatives don't go mugging people. It's the other way around. But I want to encourage you to vote and to pray for God's direction. All that to say, whatever happens next is in God's hands. We can trust Him. And my marching orders don't change. What God has called me to do, He's called me to do, no matter who's in the White House. The job of the first century Christians under Roman rule was the same as the Apostle Paul's marching orders in prison in Rome. It just didn't matter. Our job's our job. I need to love my neighbor. I'm supposed to love God, love my neighbors myself. Very specifically, I'm to love my wife and cherish her, care for her. I'm to honor my parents. My mom's still living. I'm to love those around me. I've got a church. I'm to serve my church. I'm to visit the fatherless and the widows in their affliction. I'm supposed to. Those Christian things don't change. Whoever's in a White House or whoever's in the governor's mansion doesn't change those things. So be busy for God and ask for mercy on our nation. Today I want to talk about just a little phrase, and then I'm going to mention Romans 12, very familiar to most of you. But there's a lot of people like new things. They like new phones. They like new cars. They like new slogans. Remember when the purpose-driven church was the big thing, and there was the purpose-driven life and the purpose-driven vacation or whatever. Well, that was a trendy thing. People like new stuff. Well, nobody thinks purpose-driven. And there was a time speaking in tongues was a big thing. And then the contemporary church movement, and words change and slogans and titles change. Let's just stick with the old-fashioned Bible. And let's stick with the Word of God. Do what the Word of God tells us to do. But again, people do like new things, and I'm not saying their motives are wrong. It's just who we are. But in Romans chapter 12, verse 1, it says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your, what? Your body, not your life, your body, a living sacrifice. It's not uncommon today to hear someone say, I gave my life to Christ. Or a preacher or someone on a conservative radio or whatever to say, give your life to Christ. That's a colloquialism of our time. It is not a biblical colloquialism. God wants your body. Your life is this vague, who knows what sort of a thing, kind of an abstract. But your body, that's these hands, these eyes, these ears, these lips, those feet. And so here in Romans chapter 12, he says, I want you to present your body a living sacrifice. Now, my body can't get as much done as it used to be. It gets tired more. I remember on Sunday afternoons, our little kids would go home, take a nap. My wife often would lay down or read. So I'd go down, meet up with some church guys. We'd play basketball. Well, now I'm in the Sunday afternoon nap mode regularly, not every week, but often. But I can't do what I used to do. But, I can still now I'm giving God a tired body. I've got this brace on my knee. Now I give God a wounded body, but it's still his body. Present your body a living sacrifice. In 1 Corinthians, he goes on and says the same kind of a thing in 1 Corinthians chapter 6. And it says to glorify God in your body, but in your spirit, but I'm going to read it so I'll make sure I do it right. 1 Corinthians 6, verse 20. For you are bought with a price, therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. My body, what I do with my body is to glorify God. That's why I don't think, that's one of the biggest reasons I'm against smoking. You say, well, smoking will give you cancer, defile the temple. So will McDonald's, and so will our fast food world, and so will eating all the sugar we eat. So I'm not buying that. But that cigarette doesn't glorify God. And we ought to be so very careful. A Snicker bar doesn't bring dishonor to God like smoking does. And that is a cultural thing. But my body is to glorify him. I can't go have lunch at the casino. I just can't do it. I just don't see me going into the casino, my body in that place glorifying God. Now, my body is to be presented to God. One of our men many years ago, the big Pachanga casino was built. It wasn't completed as much as now, but he was hired as a maintenance guy in the hotel, and plumbing and electrical and doors that need adjusted or whatever. He was just like you'd work for Holiday Inn or any Marriott or whatever. And he came to me and said, I just don't feel good about this. I said, what don't you feel good about? He said, working for the casino. I said, well, you got to make that decision. And he said, I'm not in the casino. I'm never around the gambling. I'm never around the liquor. I'm always in the hotel end. But he said every week or every other week, whatever, he said, I get this check from Pachanga Casino, and it bothers me. And I said, I can't tell you what to do. This is your conscience between you and God. And he kept that job for a couple of weeks and he quit. He said, I couldn't do it. I just could not keep getting checks from Pachanga Casino. I can't do it. Another one of our men, not quite as reputable as the first, but he was rough. But he was looking for a job, and he said, hey, preacher, I got a job. I said, good, where'd you get a job? He said, at the pot dispensary. And I said, what? He said, it's medicinal. You have to have prescriptions. It's a good place to work. And I said, well, it's between you and God, whatever you think. And a couple of weeks later, he said, I quit my job. I said, really? You quit your job? What'd you quit your job for? He said, they're a bunch of dope heads. This is all there are, a bunch of dope heads down there. Your body, where is your body going today? What are you going to do with your body? You heard the old story years ago of a man riding in the train when they used to ride two facing each other, a little table between them, and some guys pulled out a deck of cards. And I don't preach against cards. We don't have any in our house, but we don't play them. They're too affiliated with gambling. But I'm not. I would never preach against them. But these guys took out a deck of cards. They're playing a game, and they said, "You want to play?" Yeah. Well, the fourth guy, he didn't pick up his cards. And the guy said, "I thought you wanted to play." He said, "Well, I'd like to play, but I can't. I don't have any hands." Oh, and then they're all kind of embarrassed. Maybe you don't have any hands. Wow, that's terrible. You don't have any hands. Well, then a little later, he's holding the book, and he said, "Wait a minute. You said you had no hands." He said, "I don't. These belong to Jesus, and I can't do anything with these hands that won't glorify Jesus Christ." And again, what you do with cards, totally up to you. But my wife and I, some years ago, found ourselves in some situations where gambling had really broken some people's lives, and some real hurt toward the gambling industry and toward cards, and we just made the decision we're not going to have cards in our house. And I don't think I've ever said anything even like this in a sideline before, but I don't believe I've ever preached on it, because that's not a big deal. But the big deal is you and me saying, what will glorify God with this body? We've got to make that decision. Over in Romans chapter 16 or chapter 6, getting off the pointed subjects here. Romans chapter 6, verse 13. Neither yield ye your members, that's your hands, your eyes, your ears, your members as instruments of unrighteousness unto sin, but yield yourselves to God as those that are alive from the dead, and your members, your mouth, your eyes, your ears, your instruments as your members as instruments of righteousness unto God. Down at verse 20. For ye, when you were the servants of sin, you were free from righteousness. Verse 19. I speak after the manner of men because of the infirmity of your flesh, for as you have yielded your members, servants to uncleanness. He said, you used to use your members for unclean things. What do you look at? Is that TV you're looking at? Are you yielding your eyes to uncleanness or to cleanness that you're listening to? There's so much vulgarity. I try, especially in election era window of time like this, I listen to a lot more news, different podcasts and YouTube people and stuff. But you can't listen long before they're vulgar. And I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to listen to a bunch of vulgar, because it'll get in my head and it's going to come out of my mouth one day. But I want my ears, my members to be yielded to God. That garbage on the TV, the cheerleaders. If you're going to watch sports with your family, and I'm not against it, but somebody ought to have the remote in their hand with a quick recall to another station, so that the second that play stops and there's cheerleaders there, somebody's kicking that thing over to Me TV and Andy Griffith or something. But our members, see this thing, give your life to Christ. That's so vague. How about this? Give your eyes to Christ. Don't look at anything that would not glorify him. How about give your ears to God? Your body. Present your body. The Apostle Paul said in Philippians 1, verse 20, he said that whether by life or by death, that Christ would be magnified in my body. Magnified in my body. Over to Hebrews chapter 10. There's a passage that's talking about Jesus in particular, but I think it applies to all of us as Christians. Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 22. Let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. He says, you know what? Let's get our body clean before God. In another place here in Hebrews, he says, a body hast thou prepared me. Jesus' body was prepared. And that's why. I mean, what you've done. But I'm against tattoos. Don't go get a tattoo. Don't do things to your body that are permanent things. This body ought to be washed pure, and it ought to be presentable to God. I'm not a fanatic on diet, but I do think we ought to be careful. We ought to eat fruits and vegetables. I think we ought to limit our sugar intake. I think we ought to get some exercise. This body is all I have to serve God with. Now, I'm not a fanatic, and I eat sugar, and I love candy, and I like ice cream, but you know what? I need to be careful, because when this body gives out, I can't serve God anymore. And if it gives out at 70, 80, 90 years old, okay, I've worn this thing out. Bodies give out, and maybe some earlier than others. But I don't want to intentionally do things to this body, with this body. I don't know how I could put my teenage girl in a bikini and say, look at there, boys, all you boys, look at that girl in less than her underwear. Doesn't that glorify God? Can't do that. There's no way you can do that. Our young ladies are too pretty to dress in so little, to put them in things that are so tight and so short and so see-through and whatever. What you clothe your body with ought to glorify God. And I'm careful. When I was young as well as when I'm old now, but I'm old now because I need to keep it all covered up. It's all wrinkled and varicose veins and fat, and I want to look presentable. I want to look honorable. I remember years ago, I was a young man looking at two preachers, Joe Boyd and Jack Hyles, and they were in their 70s, maybe 80, and they just looked sharp. They couldn't get young, but you know what? Their clothes said first class. And I remember thinking, I want to stay sharp. I don't want our young people to look at me as this slobby old pastor in matching velour sweatpants and sweatshirt and wide as I am, tall, and I'm not against, I'm not preaching on weight here. I wanted as a younger pastor, I wanted to give my young people a pastor they could admire physically. You say, well, it's not all about the body. Men do look on the outside. You know they do. And all these verses show that God cares about our inside. And so where we walk, where we go, what we do, who sees me, I need to glorify God. And I've heard people talk about my mom. They'll say, your mom is so beautiful. And she always looks so sharp. Well, she can't help being over 50, but she's always attractive. And I love being around my parents. My dad's been in heaven for some years now, but he oversaw our rest homes and sang in the choir and served and helped in so many ways, but he was always sharp. And except around, he's Irish, St. Patrick's Day, my stepdad, St. Patrick's Day, he'd wear some bright green suit coat, and I think, oh, that suit coat looks so corny. But my parents were sharp. They took care of themselves, not athletes. You're not going to be 60 and, the freak person with a 30-year-old body and a, physique and a 60-year-old body. I saw I was in a spot recently and kind of resort area. And there were these ladies. They had to have so many tucks on their faces. They was like this, they couldn't blink and they couldn't smile. And it was so funny. I thought, girls, you're getting extreme. There's nothing wrong with being 70. But they wanted to look good. And I thought they looked a little funny. You can tell when somebody's had their face stretched back. I'm not picking on them. I've never been a lady. Don't plan on being one. And I have no idea the pressures that are on a woman in this culture that we're in. But I think you don't have to look 20 when you're 50, but you can be sharp, and you can keep your hair nice. But let's be careful what we do with our bodies, that it glorifies Him, that it brings honor to Him. Anyway, just some thoughts. God, give your life to Christ. I'll tell you something better. Give your eyes to Him. Give your life to Christ. I'll tell you something better. How about your vocabulary? All the words you use, may they honor and glorify God. I'm not going to curse. I don't think it's the end of the world to use curse words, but I want my words to glorify God. The Bible, 1 Corinthians, Paul says, whether therefore you eat or drink or whatsoever you do all to the glory of God. Let's let God be glorified in our members.